So I'm really excited about this last session for today, which is going to be a panel related to the collaboration for inclusive development research. But before we bring our panelists up, Amos Juguna, who's are you executive director or chairman? He's the head of NIERA, he's the chairman of NIERA and one of our Dear East Fellows and also a professor at International University in Kenya. So he's going to give us more information about CEDAR and its goals before we dive into the panel. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Maya. So I'll make a very brief presentation about the initiative that we are talking about today. The slides, please. So the initiative we are talking about today is titled CIDR, that is Collaborative Inclusive Development Research. It's an initiative that comes into force because of the fact that we know that issues of inclusion, issues of access, and collaborations amongst researchers, policymakers, and others in the ecosystem, including the practitioners, have gained lots of importance in recent times. So this initiative is being done collaboratively between the Network of Impact Evaluation Researchers in Africa, which I head at CEGA. Next slide, please. And CEGA. And the initiative generally underscores the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Of course, we have said in the morning that NIERA is made up of fellows who've gone through the East Fellowship, and the East Fellowship is hosted by CEGA. So it's therefore only natural that over the 12 years that this has happened, we've learned the need to deepen and become more inclusive and create and generate knowledge around this area. And that's why coming up with a particular theory of change that will embed and ensure that players around this area are more inclusive becomes important. So who will use this work? We have fathers, we have practitioners, we have researchers all over the world. So given this opportunity then, we seek, next slide please. Given the opportunity, we then seek to have very interactive aspect where we look through to increase the leadership and inclusion of African scholars in global development research. We know that, and as Executive Director Carson presented this morning, we have very little representation of African researchers. So one of the things we seek to do is to ask ourselves, what can we potentially do to significantly change this landscape and change the statistics? So we therefore need to do that. We need to look at the barriers. We need to review the opportunities. We need to ask ourselves what has worked, what has not worked, and what then do we need to change within the overall pipeline. So activities here you see will include aspects of building communities of like-minded individuals who are committed to change throughout the pipeline. We'll do data collection and analysis, and we will also publish the results. Most importantly, we will come up with frameworks of reference that can be used by donors, practitioners, those doing advocacy to ensure there is increased participation of African scholars amongst others that they can use to inform their programming. Next slide. So this is work that we started by dreaming about close to 2 years now. We thought that we would do this work in a relatively smaller scale initially, but then we found that there is so much that needs to be done. As a result, we started by forming a working group, and I thank some of us whom I've been seeing today participated in that virtual convention that we did in March. Sometimes mid-March we did this, and we looked at inclusion from different understandings of different stakeholders. We then made a team that's composed of both CEGA and NIERA that will then look at each of the pipeline activities that are presented in the next slide. So, what are these activities? First, there is a component for higher education. There is a component for higher education. And in the component for higher education, we look at looking at the opportunities, the barriers and incentives within the different programs in global development research. And most importantly, look at where can we find opportunities to improve or develop existing curriculums. We also seek to map out the training and mentorship opportunities for African scholars, and then see how can we innovate around that. We are very particular with regard to not duplicating what is already happening, and so we are talking to so many partners and so many organizations that are already in this space, so that we can come up with more innovative innovations. Ladies and gentlemen, the issue of publication has been discussed quite often about who is doing what, when there is collaborative research, what kind of frameworks for recognition of others comes about. This has not been left behind. We'll be looking at this and saying, what does the landscape look like? The director showed this morning that our publications across the years has been increasing, but the question we are struggling with is the increment as inclusive as all of us would want it to be, and what can we do to make it even better? And lastly, matters policy, to say again, as we look at inclusion, how can we better disseminate results? How can we much more provide frameworks that policymakers can actually use, produce acceptable results, and ensure that the work is also effectively owned and better appreciated? Because we believe that if we have greater levels of inclusion, then work becomes more acceptable, and it could also be a way of ensuring that policy recommendations are implemented. And lastly, how can funders best drive this agenda? Just to give you a feel of some of us who participated in the March initiative, you can see there, we had a number of partners. In total, we had over 50 participants who attended this convention and really helped us to shape the initiative. Most importantly, we were able to brainstorm and have discussion around what really does success look like in this perspective? And I can assure you that from the initial discussion that we did and got from that convention, we were able to significantly transform our work and the design and the way we will do it better. So we asked ourselves, what does success look like? And that's a question that I will not want to answer myself, but we do have a panel that's coming over. I will invite Maya, who is the Associate Director at CEGA, to come over and introduce the panel and help us answer these questions. How does success look like? What are the barriers? And what are we gonna do in the next 1.5 years when we get the frameworks and the publications? Ladies and gentlemen, help me applaud and welcome Maya to introduce the panel.
Thank you so much, Amos. That was a great introduction. Can we have all the panelists come up, please? So while they're coming up, I'll start introducing them. Actually, maybe I'll wait. And unfortunately, we don't have one of our panelists, Dr. Juguna Ndungu, who couldn't make it, who is from the African Economic Research Consortium. Thanks everyone for coming up. So I'll start introducing everyone. So over here we have Aimee Hare, who's a policy manager at JPAL Africa. Next to her we have Chris Chibwana, who's a program officer at the Hewlett Foundation. We have Fiona Moejes, who is the executive director of the Mawazo Institute. Tony Mveyange, who is the executive director of PASGR, the Partnerships for African Social and Governance Research, and also an East Fellow a long time back. And Jane Mariara, who's executive director of Partnerships for Economic Policy. So before I jump into the questions, and I'm going to stand here because there's no space for me there, but I'll just tell you kind of the objectives of the panel. So we heard from Amos that we're starting this new initiative, and we really wanted to call upon this panel of experts to help us frame both the barriers and opportunities for inclusion of African scholars in global development research, and also unpack a little bit about what we mean by that. So I hope you all will participate as well. I will have a lot of time for questions at the end. So it would be great to start us out. This will go to everybody, to just take about 1 minute each and tell it. There's a two-part question. So the first is, what do you see as the barriers and opportunities for African researchers to lead development research? And to also please describe your own work as it relates to this space. So we can start over here with Aimee.
Hello. Great. Well, thank you, Maya and others, for including us in this panel. I'm really honored to be here, and it's lovely to see everybody in person. So I guess if I have to think of the key barriers and opportunities for African scholars, I'm sure my colleagues will be able to give a lot more nuance to these areas. But I think from a JPAL perspective, we really see that the barriers kind of fall into three main buckets. So there are challenges related to research funding, which is something that JPAL is really trying hard to fill. The next sort of barrier is around networks and kind of access to these networks, especially within academia. I think there, within African scholars, often these sort of barriers to networks are kind of amplified by geography, along with other sort of key barriers within academia. And then I think the third barrier is around training and having the access to the appropriate training. I think from a JPAL's perspective, we look at randomized evaluations. So having the sort of key training within that space is really necessary and one of the barriers that we see. And so I think from JPAL, we are part of our work within supporting African scholars is to open up more research funding within our different research initiatives to be able to have more local researchers running these randomized evaluations with the intention that we have more local researchers sort of driving the research agenda on the continent. And yeah, I'm going to pause there and hand over to Chris, who I'm sure will give us.
Yeah, thanks, Aimee. So I think from a funder perspective, so I work for the Hewlett Fund. I think one of the key barriers is just where the power lies. So power is really centered for that have the money, the people that are funding research. Now, the government has every right. The UK government and the US government have every right to want their citizens to lead research that they're funding. African governments aren't investing in research, and therefore it's very difficult for African citizens to have those opportunities to lead research. Now, I think the challenge with sort of collaborations and inclusive research is that if the funding is coming from the north, well, the questions that are going to be investigated will be determined already. And by the time that African researchers are brought into the conversation, the agenda has been set. Contracts have been signed, those questions are final. And so any optimization that we're going to do is just going to be on the margins. And so I think there's need for African governments to invest in research, but I think also, even when that's not possible, there's an opportunity for philanthropy, I guess non-government philanthropy, so private philanthropy like the Hewlett Foundation, to help advocate for more inclusion and more balanced power in defining the research agenda and defining who conducts the research.
Thanks, Chris. I think everything that's been said is already covering quite a bit, but I think what I'd like to add to that is one of the barriers is the ability for our institutions to actually even have the capacity to lead on some of these projects. Do they have the ability to run the big grants and the big projects? If we built that capacity, will then funders be more willing to trust us to run these big projects and run it from this side? And I mean, coming from the Mawazo Institute, which is really an organization that supports African women in research and making sure that their voices and ideas are really leading and pushing for solutions to the development problems. Another issue is changing how, the ecosystem of our research institutions to allow for inclusivity, to allow for researchers to bring their whole selves to their research. The way things are, I feel like we've created an environment where we're missing a lot of voices just because they feel they can't fit in or they don't have the right background or approach to come and do research. And I think we need to do more to really support and really inspire that creativity and that curiosity in our people, so that they can also come and bring their ideas and bring curiosity for new solutions to our problems. I think I will leave it at that, and I'll pass it on to you, Tony.
All right, thank you so much. This is exciting, very much so. First, let me, because you had asked us to say something about our organization, and my colleagues never took that chance, I'm going to take it. So what is PASGR? Partnership for African Social and Governance Research is a Pan-African organization, roughly about 11 years since inception, operating in over 26 countries in Africa, with key mission of advancing research in public policy and governance in the continent. So if you're interested, the poster is outside. I'm doing some marketing. I hope I'm allowed. Now, go to the question. What are the barriers? What are the opportunities? Let me start off with some of the barriers. What I tend to see and what we see in our work is competition vis-a-vis complementarities at the institutional level. We all know I'm an economist, and the economists, we have ego. We tend to think that our discipline is superior than any other social scientist, for example. So that has limited collaborations across multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and cross-disciplinaries in Africa. I think that's a barrier that has really limited in answering complex public policy challenges that the continent is facing, which would require not only an economist eye, it also requires a social scientist eye, social sociology eye, and so on and so forth. The second barrier that I would like to register is the poor visibility of African research and research output. African research is not visible. And in many cases, and as Aimee said, publication co-authorship are skewed towards the West. I think it's about time now we decolonize African research, allowing African scholars getting visibility. I like what I see here because this is a true representation of what actually collaboration means. Most of the research work that is presented in this summit includes a lot of African scholars. This is not necessarily the case in many parts of the continent, and I think that needs to be addressed. And finally, on the barriers, William Estley wrote a book, Tyrant of Experts. For those who have read that book, you know, Tyrant of Experts, having Western voices disclosing African research. Are we supposed to be there now? The answer is no. We need to build the capacity, so we do away with Tyrant of Experts. Instead of African research being dominated by the Western voices, it needs to be dominated by the African voices. Capacities here, people are educated, population is coming up, and we have everything possible to do that. What are the quick opportunities that I can mention? I think based on my first point, we need to actually create an opportunity for adopting multidisciplinary research approaches that includes different disciplines, economists, geographers, historians, coming together to answer some of the pressing public policy questions and challenges. We need to encourage and promote African published scholars and journals that are African-oriented. Most of the time we see when you publish in the West, then you become, it doesn't mean that Africa doesn't have indigenous knowledge that is actually very lucrative, very good. So we need to promote that. We don't see that often. My organization is at the forefront of championing such efforts. And I think finally, the last 2 points is, fourth industrial revolution is here. We are talking of youth unemployment bulge. 1.3 billion people in Africa, 70% are youth below 30 years. 65% are youth below 25 years. So there are opportunities to do very good research that can have impact on policy in the continent. And finally, I think there's an interest in the donor community, Chris mentioned, about where the power lies. And donors now are very keen on collaborative work. And what is the composition in the teams? I think that's an opportunity that we need to tap. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think a lot has been said, so I'll try not to repeat everything. The first one, I do agree that one of the key barriers is the research capacity. I know we can say that we've come from very far. Of course, where we were, maybe if you think about 20 years ago, purpose 20 years ago, I'll talk about that. Where we were 20 years ago is not where we are. We have come a long way. But I know from where I sit that the research capacity in the Global South, Africa especially, is still not quite what we require for us to be able to compete or to participate very well in development research. And we have raw skills, or raw proposal writing skills, so that even though there are a lot of opportunities now, I know funding is a problem, but there are increasingly more and more opportunities. But we do find that, for instance, maybe we'll call for proposals. We want to fund 15 proposals. We get 300 proposals, but so many of them are very poorly written. So there's a lot of skill development that we still need in our systems. And I think most of us have read maybe some studies that have been done in the past, which have talked about the role, maybe literacy skills that we are still having in some parts of Africa, even in Kenya. Because sometimes you look at even from lower levels, maybe you expect a child in a grade 8, for instance, to be able to read and write, but you find that they do not have that proficiency. And it starts from that low level, then going higher. You find that we do not have the capacity. Second, I think funding, lack of adequate funding has been spoken about, but maybe I would want to emphasize the fact that there is always the opportunity cost, there are time constraints, and therefore, how do you incentivize researchers to be able, even when there's some funding, to be able to allocate adequate time for research? Because there are a lot of competing activities which are not necessarily remunerated. Because of the type of infrastructure that we have maybe in our countries, you find that researchers or even academicians who tend to spend a lot of time in unproductive activities and therefore cannot take advantage even of the little research funding that there is. Of course, there's the issue of the research infrastructure and equipment. We are still not where we should be. Libraries not always very well equipped. I think the challenge of ICT, it's of course improved a lot, internet connectivity, but I think the real challenge has been realized during the COVID lockdowns, because we know there are areas where even universities have been able to go on with their education programs through online teaching. But the others that we know that at best we are cheating ourselves, because if you look at the more remote areas of our countries, where university students are, for sure we know they can't really access the internet, and you are saying that education has been going on online. And then finally, maybe just a fourth point is the fact that we still have relatively low access to conferences and seminars for people in Africa, the Global South. And I agree with my colleague that this is a very good case where we have so many locals that are able to come. What we know and what our research has shown, and I think we all know, is that sometimes important development conferences, economic conferences, maybe based on work from the South, will take place in the North. And then the question is, how many scholarships then are we able to give to our researchers to go participate in those conferences? But why am I talking about conferences? Because we know that they'll provide the networking opportunities for our younger researchers to be able to interact with others and to sharpen their skills, or even just to be challenged to know that they can actually do better. In terms of the opportunities, I will not repeat what has been said. I'll talk about now what we do ourselves as PEP. So Partnership for Economic Policy is a global think tank. We support capacity development in the Global South in research and policy engagement. I want to emphasize policy engagement because we go beyond training. We provide funding for research, but then our funding is more intensive on the mentorship, both scientific and mentorship in policy engagement, because we pair our researchers with policy mentors who can actually help them ensure that the research is policy engaged. So the opportunities that we are providing then will go beyond just funding research. We'll go to mentorship. We provide access to libraries. We've done this over the last 20 years in collaboration with IDRC. We provide subsidized software. So for projects that we support, we ensure that we acquire the software for our researchers, and then we do support them to hold national policy conferences and also give them international conference grants. And finally, we give them incentives to publish in good journals by providing editorial services for the papers that are produced from our work. We ensure that we support them to have the work reviewed internally, or even where we have to pay for that review before they can submit to journals. And then where we can support open access publication, we do that. And we give publication incentive grants after they have published in a certain tier of journal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Can we just have a round of applause? I was so inspired by it. I was taking furious notes during that whole thing. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. So almost showed you the kind of framework that we're using before, where we're talking about the pipeline from higher education all the way to policy impact. So I want to focus on the first part of the pipeline, which is higher education. So some of our panelists have already touched on this. Jane just touched on capacity strengthening. But I want to direct this to Tony and Fiona, because I think you have a lot of experience in this. And of course, if anyone else wants to weigh in, feel free. But the question is, what strategies show the most promise in terms of strengthening the higher education pipeline for aspiring African social scientists? So Fiona, I'll turn it to you first.
Thank you, Maya. So for us, what we found through the work that we do at Mawazo, we do a lot of surveying. I think our fellows are kind of tired of us sending them surveys, but it's the best way to get a snapshot of the reality of the things that they're facing, and how some of our interventions are helping. And we found that definitely mentorship is a really big one. And mentorship, we kind of tie it to our networking approaches, in that, you know, mentorship can give them access to experts, but we have to go beyond that. We have to think about what other support do they need? And so we have a networking activities that include peer-to-peer. So we really try to create a community amongst our fellows to support each other through the journey of doing a PhD, being researchers, being African women researchers in places where they're often the minority. But we've also tried another approach where because we realized there was something missing. You know, with mentorship, and you've got an expert that's a senior person, and there's certain things you don't want to go to them because you don't want to seem as if you don't know. And then peer-to-peer, you also don't want to seem, you know, like you can't do things to your peers. So we kind of figured there was a gap there. And so we ran a pilot program where we had our alumni come on board as kind of, kind of like support. We didn't even call them anything, you know, like mentors or anything. It was really a support program where our current fellows had the opportunity to reach out to the alumni. And the alumni were compensated for their time, and they could ask them whatever it is they needed support on. And the support they needed ranged from everything from, you know, can you help me write an academic manuscript? Can you help me review this proposal I've written? To really personal things around how to balance, you know, their life as African women and researchers, how to deal with really sensitive issues within their research labs. And we found it interesting because they couldn't reach out to their peers, and they didn't want to reach out to their mentors, and they clearly weren't getting the support in their lab. So that support system, for us, whether that's through mentorship, through networking, has been so extremely powerful to build their confidence and build their ability to get opportunities. And then the other thing is training. And I'm sure Tony will touch on more, but for us, the training in things that are not at all technical. So really and I don't like to use the word soft skills, but really those really nuanced skills around public speaking, how to communicate their research, how to do policy engagement in a way that is effective, how to think even just about their research beyond their lab, beyond their research sphere, beyond academia. Like how can, you know, to really get them to think about the bigger picture, so to ensure that their ideas and their creative, their very curiosity-driven approaches to their research is really influencing things where impact is happening, you know, whether that's innovation, whether that's policy making. So yeah, the training of providing the training on the other side of research is what we found has been really powerful too. And of course, research funding, providing flexible research funding beyond things that are very specific to their research, providing grants that allow them to travel to conferences, that allow them to access, you know, workshops that are not necessarily in their field, but could support them in their career down the line for impact. And so, yeah, for us, that's what we found has been the most impactful on our end. So yeah, I'll hand over to you, Tony.
You have said what I wanted to say. Now I have nothing to say. All right. Thank you, Fiona. I won't go into mentorship, and Fiona has really alluded to that very well. So mine is basically 4 points. One is from PASGR's perspective, and maybe just a minute to talk a little bit about PASGR. We have three arms. One is research and policy, which focuses on generating evidence in public policy and governance in the continent. The second arm is higher education, where we run 3 programs, Masters in Research in Public Policy, which we are running across 14 universities in 8 countries in the continent. We have a doctoral program in public policy, which we are running in 3 regional hubs: West Africa, University of Ibadan; East Africa, University of Nairobi; South Africa, University of Pretoria. And we have pedagogical leadership, which I'll talk about shortly. And the last arm is professional development and training, which I'm happy to say we partnered with NIERA to build capacity of early career researchers in building new skills to do their research better. Now, what we see in our work is collaborations between universities. The 3 programs that I talked about in the higher education, they are running concurrently across the universities. So for example, for the master's and the doctoral program, we have the same curricula that is being taught across different countries, different universities. And we also allow in-regional exchange programs between students, meaning students in Kenya can actually go and study in South Africa and so on and so forth. During COVID, for example, we had a crisis in Nigeria where University of Ibadan teaching staff demonstrated and classes were stopped. Our PhD students were easily transferred to South Africa because it's the same curricula, the same program, the same funding program. So that, for us, we find that collaboration is key. Building collaborative programs is key. We are currently in the pipeline of developing a very innovative approach we call PASGR Plus. Plus stands for People Learning, Understanding, and Sharing, which will bring together African scholars from students, senior scholars, sharing data, sharing research. And once it's ready, you'll see. Please keep in touch with our website. Now, the second element that I want to talk about is institutional capacity building and support program to deliver. And I'll talk about one key program that we've done. It's called PEDO. PEDO is Pedagogical Leadership in Africa. You can Google on your phone, you will see. Pedagogical Leadership in Africa, so far we have trained lecturers in 159 universities in the continent across 11 countries. We have trained over 3,000 lecturers. It's about pedagogy. You can be a very good economics professor, but you are terrible at teaching. And this, we know this is a fundamental problem in our universities. How do we teach teachers how to teach? Because that has an impact whether you are going to create a critical mass of students who actually love the subject and become experts in that field. So we are investing a lot in building capacity, pedagogical leadership, especially with the onset of COVID-19, blended learning. How do we balance the two? They are old professors. When you ask them to log in, they have no clue even how to log in. How do you teach effectively online? How do we engage students? We have seen our program having a huge impact, and as we speak right now, we're actually expanding to Francophone Africa in executing this innovative way of addressing pedagogy in Africa. The third I would like to talk about is scientific retooling of students. And this is part that where we talk about professional development and training. We have what we call Method Institute. We have Advanced Research Institute. And we are currently partnering with our colleagues in the global north, where we want also to allow African researchers not only to learn, but also to share. So, for example, we know randomized control trial, they are very new. Not so many African scholars know about that. How do we build a pipeline of African scholars who are privy to or are open to the current practices, best practices in research in the continent? So our professional development training allows for that. And our researchers, we have quite a number of them, policymakers, always come back and say, what training are you offering now? What training are you offering? For those who are following PASGR online, in March, jointly with NIERA, we did a training on impact evaluation for public policy. And we had students from 8 countries, including the West, Germany, Nepal, attending online. So you can see the impact of building that capacity that is needed in the continent. And finally, my last point is on sustainability, diversity and for capacity building. How much are we investing? Jane has talked about it. Sustainability is key because most of these interventions are short-lived, 3, 4, 5 years, then what next? So for PASGR, we are creating sustainability plans in place. Of course, endowment fund, reserve fund, to make sure that in time when funds dry, we are still able to continue. But most importantly, we're investing heavily on social capital. So for example, on the PEDO program, we institutionalize these universities such that they're able to take it up themselves, to the extent that they don't have to rely on PASGR or our donors to support such activities. So we also invest heavily on social capital, building the capacity of the relevant universities, building the ecosystem where, in the absence of PASGR, things will still move. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Fiona and Tony. Those are great responses. So I want to talk a little bit about funding here. I think we've brought this up several times, and I want to just explore that a little bit with Chris and Aimee, who are both kind of research, well, yeah, Aimee's a research funder too, and talk about, speak to a little bit about the role of funders doing a good job supporting inclusive research. And so I'm curious about your thoughts about how, I think a lot of us are aware that there's been various approaches to funding African scholars, so that includes very explicitly saying this competition, this research funding is only for African scholars. Sometimes it's implicit. There's different ways of doing this. So if you have any thoughts on, how we can best do this. Yeah, Chris and Aimee, I'll let you go ahead.
Sure, good question. So I think I see the role of funders, one of the roles of funders is to, and basically for good or worse, the ones that are defining the rules in development, right? So if BMGF comes and says, this is important, like all the NGOs will jump on that and because BMGF says it's important. And so I think the signaling effect that donors have to just point organizations and people to the values that I think we should be doing our work, we should be using for our work, I think that signaling effect cannot be ignored. And so whether it's explicitly or whether it's implicitly, if nothing is being done, I think using the power of philanthropy to ensure that action starts to be taken, I think is something that's very important. Now, I think another role that funders have, and I think this is something that the Hewlett Foundation is very much committed to, is supporting the strengthening of the knowledge ecosystem in Africa, or in the global south more broadly. I think we heard about capacity. Jen mentioned that there's a lack of capacity. I do think that there is capacity. I think the issue is trust. The Hewlett Foundation follows what we call trust-based philanthropy, which is we trust your organization, we trust that you know what's good for your countries, we trust that you can manage resources, including financial resources, and we'll give you the money and we'll see you in a year. Give us a report after the year, tell us what you did. I think that's what philanthropy should be doing. Unfortunately, it's not the case. I think Hewlett is probably the extreme in that regard, but we need to be able to trust local organizations, local think tanks, local universities, that if we give them the resources, they will use those resources responsibly, they'll do what's right, because after all, they're the ones who care about these issues more than we do. Because, I mean, if you're a citizen of Tanzania and you're working on research in Tanzania on food security, that affects you, it affects your family members that are living in Tanzania. And so people really care about these issues and they're committed to doing the right thing. And so I think philanthropy in general, funders, donors, should really just trust the organizations that are in this room, the organizations that are doing this hard work.
Great, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I think so. JPAL's in an interesting position because we both are funded by the Hewlett Foundation, and we also act as funders in that we fund African scholars as grantees. So, I mean, I think if I think about the role of funders in this sort of broader sort of ecosystem, I'd say that their role, it would be exciting if there were more funders doing more of this work, of course. But I think part of that role in them doing more is also kind of facilitating and ensuring that we are collaborative amongst groups who are kind of working towards a similar goal. So I think that there's just there are so many opportunities between groups who are either supporting African scholars or African scholars themselves to work collaboratively and to find synergies across groups so that we aren't as sort of siloed and that we can kind of learn as a group. And I think donors have quite a lot of power in being able to facilitate those sort of collaborations. So really excited about CEDA as one of those sort of examples, and hopefully we can do more of that. We do have an inclusive development research working group that we're really, we meet quarterly, and I think this is just one of the opportunities where we're kind of kick-starting that collaboration and trying to find exciting ways to work together. And then I guess from the different approaches as a funder, so putting my funder hat on, I mean, I don't know if I can speak to all the approaches, but the one that JPAL uses is sort of earmarked funding within certain research initiatives for specifically for African scholars. And yeah, I mean, is it successful? I think I would hope so. It may be a little bit early to say, but we have funded a number of scholars. So I think there are 38 researchers that we've funded so far, which is really exciting. A couple of them I've seen in the audience, which is exciting too. And this is with 26 different projects, both sort of pilot and proposal development grant projects across 2 different research initiatives. And yeah, I mean, I think they've been successful in that we've been able to match in mentors from the JPAL network to be that sort of support that Fiona was talking about in a way. And we have a number of new research initiatives that are also going to be bringing in their own African scholars programs. So watch this space when it comes to the other sort of sectors that might also have African scholars.
Thanks so much. Does anyone want to comment from a non-funder perspective on what Aimee mentioned? Or we can move to the, yeah, go ahead.
I can maybe just say quickly, you know, what Hewlett does is quite incredible. For us, what has really helped is the operational support to really build our capacity to absorb more funding so we can do more work. And so having that trust in us has allowed for us to be really kind of like creative in what we want to do, to really listen to the needs of our beneficiaries and try new things. So yeah, just to say that, you know, that kind of flexible funding and really building those relationships with your beneficiaries or yeah, who are going to get the funding is so important. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Anna. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I think, Chris, you have made a very good point. Trust is key. A few weeks ago, we had a conversation about rethinking development cooperation for Africa. And I would like to I made one observation, I'm going to make it again. Donors in the room, give us open checks. Let us set the agenda. Give us open checks. And let us set the agenda. So in addition, that's the essence of trust. Because you're giving me money, let me decide what is a priority for me and trust that I'll be able to deliver. So give us open check and let's work on trust. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, James, yeah.
Okay, interesting. I think very interesting, especially the last comments my colleague here, because then we also need to escalate it to the next level. I think we are funded and then we are also funding. So we are also donors. And in a way, that trust also, we also do have that relationship. Of course, we know there are risks in trusts. And even us where we are sitting and where the others are sitting, there are risks. But I think over time, I think what we've learned is that even researchers, someone who sits down and diligently writes a proposal, they know what they want. And so when you give them the grant, they actually execute it. It's only that the point is that we still need to work with them. Okay, for us, I know it's a bit different, and I'll say that because I know we have some researchers here. that some years back, I think in 2016, we had a review of our programs by one of our fathers, actually DFID. And one of the things that they made us adopt is what we call deliverables that are, payments that are based on deliverables, so that you don't always give the money up front. And I know researchers wonder where that comes from, but it's kind of you incentivize delivery. This does not mean that you do not trust, but what we have discovered is that over time, actually, it even improves the quality of the deliverables, because the researcher knows that, okay, if I work on this proposal, if I work on this paper published in a very good journal, I'm going to get so many dollars at the end of it. But of course, there's a shortcut where maybe in some cases you give out the funds, but you don't necessarily get the level that you want. So I think there's we have to look at both sides. Trust is very important. We have it both ways, from the father to us and even us to the fathers. But let researchers not ask why do we sometimes have those conditionalities. Sometimes it's for just to ensure that we get the quality that we really want. Thank you.
Thank you. Always so much to say about funding. So we have about 10 minutes left of my questions, and we want to shift to the audience questions, so we can keep the next responses kind of brief. But I want to make sure to talk about governments and policy making, because all of us are interested in evidence-informed policy. We had an amazing panel this morning. We heard from the minister. So I want to talk about this first in terms of how you've all had so much experience, I think, with engaging governments to stimulate demand, to co-create research agendas, and kind of enhancing the relevance of African researchers. Okay, I messed this up. I'm going to start this up. So the question is, how can African researchers engage governments to stimulate demand, co-create research agendas with policymakers, and enhance the relevance of their research? So if anyone wants to speak to that, I don't have, yeah, Jane, you could go first.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I'm happy to answer it because I think it's one of the things that we do maybe very intensively, and what we believe we do very well. And I'll look at it, maybe 3 quick points. That the best thing that we can do it first is to ensure that our researchers engage governments from the earliest stage of their project. Actually, as we insist at the conception of the project, so that then the government officers help our researchers to think more about the policy issue at the ground, or more of the policy questions, because the researcher will come with a research question, but does that research question really address the policy problem at hand? That is the first one. Then the second one is more of a strategic approach, and it's a question of even if you are working with policy makers, even if you are addressing a policy question, what are the stakeholders that you need to engage with? What are the policy stakeholders and also other stakeholders? Because we know it's not just about the policy makers. There are quite a number of stakeholders who will be interested in this. And then once you know them, then what will be the best way to reach out to these stakeholders? And over time, from our experience, this has led us to start what we call policy outreach mentorship. And this is where I mentioned earlier that for each of the projects that we do now since 2019, we ensure that we are pairing our researchers with a policy advisor. Someone who knows about research, but who also knows about policy issues, policy design, policy implementation. They will work with them together with the policy makers to ensure that they are asking the right question, they are engaging with the right stakeholders, and at the right time, so that in the end, the work leads to impact. And finally, we have what we call the research co-production, that we will not fund any project that is just by researchers alone. they must be paired with at least 1 or 2 policymakers in the research team. So from the inception to the end, they'll have to work together. And this one has actually, again, led to a lot of engagement or actual adoption of our work by policymakers. Not just that work, but going forward. If we have more time, I can talk about it.
Thanks, Jane. I think that I'm just going to move to my final question so I can give the audience some time. So just keep this to like a 10-second, 20-second response. And I want to know if so we've talked so much about, we're all doing so much, we're doing so many efforts here to improve the landscape. And so if all of our efforts are successful, how will the development research space look different 5 years from now? So we'll start with Aimee and we'll go down the line.
It's a big question. Yeah, I mean, I think that there are 3 big things that I could think about for the next 5 years. I think I would be really excited if, one, we could have more African scholars leading the research agenda in sub-Saharan Africa. And I think having more scholars from Francophone Africa would be fabulous too. The second bucket is around more collaboration across groups who are supporting this work. So finding ways to work together and finding those synergies to really enhance the work as a collective. And then the third is around kind of the South-to-South collaboration. JPAL is working on an African Scholars Program, but we also have an Indian Scholars Program. So I think in the next 5 years, I would love to see more collaborations and learnings across the different regions, just as a way to enhance the work overall.
Yeah, I think for me, success would be we come back here in 5 years and we're not having this conversation about the inclusion of African scholars in development research.
Goodness. For me, I think seeing definitely more first authorship by African scholars, seeing really collaborative, really like interdisciplinary collaborative projects happening with expertise from all different fields coming together and being able to really communicate with each other really well. I think that would be really great to see. And my final point, which I've lost now, I think would be, goodness, I've lost my thought there. But yeah, if it comes back.
Happened to me too.
All right. Thank you, Maya. Wow, what do I expect to see in 5 years? So let me start with the last one, which is important. I hope, if I still will be alive, to see a think tank of think tanks. One think tank of think tanks. Why am I saying that? What we see in the continent, in many countries that I've been going to, in one country you have A, B, C, D think tanks. They're all going to the government with the same evidence and confuses the policymakers. So can we curate and synthesize that evidence so that what is communicated with to the policymakers is synthesized? I think that's key. I would love to see that happening. I would like to see in the next 5 years there's a critical mass of well-trained African researchers who are taking ownership. Of course, now we are talking of decolonizing knowledge. I think it should be talking, it should be walking now and doing it. So in the next 5 years, I would like to see some statistics. How many African scholars have been trained in what disciplines, and how many are leading in publishing, in leading this research across the continent. I would like to see more of visibility of African researchers' work, particularly the indigenous and local knowledge being captured to inform policymaking. I think this is key. You know, as much as there are models that are developed from the Western countries, which are good, can they be contextualized to reflect African realities? I think that is very key. And finally, I would like to see strengthened institutional capacities. We are seeing a lot of NIERA people trained, DIWA people are being trained. Each institutions here are training. Can we see more institutional capacity in the next 5 years? I think that is possible. And we have Hewlett here in the room. They are listening, so I think, Chris, take note and go back, tell them we need more money in that space. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Where I would want or expect to see this in 5 years, I would emphasize locally led, policy engaged research, read by people from Africa or from the Global South, because we look at the Global South in general. Of course, to get there, it's not just about what we are doing. I think, as we've said, the fathers in the room, we need more funding. We still need more funding because there are so many aspects. But I think what I want to say most important is that I think all of us here, we are committed to seeing more participation, more representation of people from the Global South in this debate, in this work. And I will refer you to our poster, because recently, early in the year, actually, PEP, we launched a call to action on how we can promote participation of people from the Global South in this work, in this debate. So please get to the poster. We'll talk more about that. But really, I think, as my colleague here said, we are all doing this. I'm seeing this as what the Southern Voice does, bringing think tanks together. But we can't be sitting in this room and we are all talking about doing the same thing and then not think about collaboration. So I think I just want to thank the organizers for thinking about this initiative. But I think you still need to do more to bring us together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Can we move to any questions from the audience? There, at the back. I see two at the back. So please direct your questions to a specific panelist if you can. Can someone had a question at the back, right? Can we get him get them microphones? Please raise your hands high. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to the panelists for those insightful comments. My name is Martin from PASGR. One question to Chris. Could you tell us a little bit what Hewlett is doing to deal with the issue of power imbalance that we can learn from? And to the panelists, I didn't hear anything about the growing commercialization of knowledge generation in the continent. You know, the huge number of, PwC, Dalberg, McKinsey, taking lead in generation of public knowledge. And directly killing public generation of knowledge, which should be a public good. So it will be useful to, hear reflection from the panel, what they think about this and how we can reverse this process. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's take two more and then the panel will respond.
Thanks.
Okay. Hello?
Okay. The issue of capacity of researchers has featured in most of these kind of forums. And even today, almost every one of the panelists did talk about capacity gap among the researchers in Africa. And I've always wondered that despite a lot of investment in capacitating the researchers, we are still having this conversation. I don't know whether there is any insights coming from the panelists, but I would like to make a proposal to the this collaboration of inclusive development research, that perhaps we need to do some evidence generation to find out exactly what is happening, where are we going wrong, what are we not doing right, so that we can stop this conversation and start talking about Africa researchers do have the right skills.
Hello. So I want to raise 2 points for the panel. Hello again. Yeah. Related to the role of government in promoting collaborative research between, or at least in the inclusion of African researchers in development research. I think the role of government is not as much emphasized in this panel, I have to say. So when we think of development research inclusion, you guys talked about starting from higher education training all the way up to policy making. But one of the challenges of African researchers is that the incentive structures in higher learning institutions is so misaligned that it's so disincentivizing even for the most talented researchers to continue producing research. And if there is no sort of incentive structure well aligned, then basically that kills the motive and the drive. And that's, I think, how are you guys approaching governments to actually realign the incentive structures in higher education institutions so that they emphasize and sort of reward research among African scholars? And the second point is, recently I've noticed some developments in major journals such as Science and Lancet into recognizing the contribution of local research collaborators. And even they don't accept, for example, research publications which do not explicitly recognize local research collaborators from developing nations, for example. And how can funders like Hewlett or others can actually ensure that local African contributions are actually recognized in publications so that those local collaborators can actually get visible and sort of enhance future collaborations? Thank you.
Thanks, Dagam. I think we have to cut off the questions and let the panel respond because I think everyone's eager to get to the happy hour. So those were a lot of questions. I'll let you all take them as you wish. Sorry, I'm not helping much.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I'll address the question that came of the capacity gaps, why they still exist, or whether they still exist. I don't know whether the person who asked the question, whether she does not believe they still exist. I think we already spoke about the barriers, because these are really the barriers to this capacity. When we are saying that there are barriers to research excellence, what are we saying? That really our researchers are not getting there. And sometimes it's not even a question of the training. Sometimes we are trained. How many maybe good researchers do we know? Students complete their PhDs in very good universities, even in the north. They come back, but because of maybe the nature of our economies, you come as a, okay, let me talk as a professor, because in my other hat, I'm a professor of economics from the University of Nairobi. You get this young scholar who has come back from PhD, and then immediately they are given so many classes to teach. They do not have time to actually concentrate on excelling in research. And therefore, when you come then to competing in terms of research, writing, publication, it becomes an issue. And then maybe such a student, such a scholar, you find that 10 years down the line, you find that they are not where you actually expected them to be. So you could think about systemic barriers, you could think about demand side and supply side factors. There are many factors. But where I'm sitting, I gave an example that we call out an expression of interest because we want to fund research. Sometimes you get over 300 applications, but you realize that even though you are going to build capacity of these researchers, there are very few of them who will actually be able to execute research independently on their own. And I'm sure there are many funders in this room, maybe including CEGA, who have had that experience. Thank you. I think that's all.
Thanks. And Chris, do you want to take the question about funding?
Sure. So I'll speak about, I think there was a question that was directly addressed to the Hewlett Foundation and what we're doing to shift power in our grant making. So there are two things that we're doing. One is just looking internally within the foundation, how we're structured, how we're set up, how is the team, what's the team composition? And so I think some of you who are grantees will know that we had a transition within the evidence-informed policy-making team. And I think the deliberate decision that the foundation made was to bring in people that have lived experiences to oversee the portfolio. So I think within the EAP team, there's 5 people. I'm from Malawi. There's another person, Hussein, from Senegal. And then I work with Mai, who's from Brazil, and then there are 2 Americans on the team. And so trying to balance and bring in the perspective of people that have lived experiences so that we can actually relate better with the sort of challenges that researchers and organizations in the Global South face. So that's one thing. The second thing that we're doing is basically trying to increase the proportion of our funding that goes to organizations in the Global South. And so we did an analysis recently, and actually within our evidence-informed policy-making portfolio, we found that 63% of our grantees are from the Global South. But 43% of our funding goes to those organizations. So the bulk of the funding still goes to the fewer grantees that are from the Global North. And so that's something that we're continuing to work on to try and increase the amount of funding that goes to organizations in the Global South, but also just the number of organizations from the Global South that we're funding.
Thanks, Chris. Any last response to the incentive structures or any other question?
Yes. I wanted to give my thoughts on first the commercialization of research. I think commercialization is coming from capacity gaps, obviously, because we don't see Dalberg set in the United States. It's in Africa because there are gaps. Now, how do we address this? So I think, in my opinion, there are 2 angles that the government can actually intervene. One is regulation, putting in place policy response to respond to this commercialization of public good. But there could also be a backfire effect. Can it stifle innovation? Can it stimulate innovation? I don't know. So regulation could be one way to think about it. We all know research and development in sub-Saharan Africa is less than 1% of the GDP. So I think there's a concerted effort there for the governments to actually increase funding, locally led funding to support research, so much so that universities can compete with this private sector. On the question on the role of government and incentives, well, this is a broader public policy debate about budgeting, how much is allocated on health, on education. So as much as we might have as individual institutions, we build capacity, we invest in individual or departments or faculties, I think on a broader scale, you would need more wider intervention by the government. And there, of course, you can have politics also coming into play, which we may not necessarily be able to control. The last one, collaboration vis-a-vis recognition. There's an article that was released a couple of weeks ago, helicopter research. There's a statement in Cape Town that was released by African scholars to condemn the current practice where African scholars are being used passively. So this is the helicopter research. And I think the Cape Town statement that was released a few weeks ago is a good step in the right direction. And we need more of this. We need to condemn, we need to speak publicly that this is unfair. You cannot come to Africa, you start about African problems, and you don't acknowledge Africans. It's unfair. It's completely wrong. I cannot do that in Europe. I cannot do that in America. Why would someone else come in Africa and do that? Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I think we're gonna, do you wanna, okay. Okay, well, they'll all be here in the happy hour, so please keep asking questions. Can we have a big round of applause for the panelists? That was such an insightful panel. I took a lot of notes. So I'd love to just close us out for today. So thank you so much to all the presenters, to all the staff, to the poster presenters that contributed to today. So can we have a big round of applause? So some reminders. So we're going to have a cocktail reception in the same terrace. We're going to keep going with the poster presentations. I think I saw a lot of people moving around with the posters, so I'm not sure if we fully stuck to half before and half now, but feel free to go stand by your poster again and keep sharing with everybody as they come by. I think that, just want to remind everybody to keep your name badge for tomorrow, because this is going to serve as proof of negative COVID results. So you won't have to show any COVID results again tomorrow. Keep being diligent about masks. It's a lot of people in here, big room. I know we're taking a lot of precautions, but let's keep trying to keep that up. And posters are going to stay up tomorrow as well. So we'll start tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. So try to get here by around 8:45 if you can. So thank you so much.